Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Western Spirit. In today's episode, we're going to speak with someone very special. Prime Minister Tony Abbott was the Australian Prime Minister from 2013 to 2015. He's been in politics in Australia for 30 plus years or so. He's been someone on the forefront of the fight for Western civilization, on the forefront for conservative and liberal in the European sense, meaning free markets and freedom of speech and freedom of movement and freedom in general for years and years, even since he was prime minister and left office. And so I think you're really going to enjoy the conversation in light also of the Australian election that just ended. So enjoy. Prime Minister Tony Abbott, is a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you, Ariel.
So, Prime Minister Abbott, we had the election in Australia last week, Saturday. We're talking on Wednesday. Can I get your reaction to what we saw? I assume you're very disappointed.
You're correct. I am very disappointed. I'm not altogether surprised because for the last couple of months the polls were going against us, and now that we've lost and we can speak freely, it was a pretty disappointing policy offering. But I think that the coalition, the centre-right Liberal National Coalition, has good values. We have sound instincts. We still have very solid people in the parliament. I think we can regroup. I think we have to regroup for our country's sake. And I believe that as a party which is liberal in the sense that we believe in smaller government, lower taxes, greater freedom, conservative in the sense that we support the family, small business and institutions that have stood the test of time, but above all else, patriotic, believing that Australia is the best country in the world to live and wanting to keep it that way. I think as the Patriot Party, the Freedom Party, and the Tradition Party, we can well and truly speak to the entire Australian people when we're at our best, and I hope we'll certainly be better in this term than we turned out to be in the last one.
So I did an article in our magazine of the anti-Semitism in Australia since October 7th. I interviewed all of the Jewish community leaders in Australia, regular citizens, people whose businesses have been vandalized. We've seen since October 7th, I'm in Israel, so it's not comparable, obviously, but what Australian Jews have been going through is something that they've never gone through before. They're totally surprised of what has happened, and a lot of them told me that if the election would go the way it actually went, they would be very worried about their future in Australia. How do you react to this? A lot of them now in the groups that I'm in are so disappointed, fearful of their future in your great country. Where are we going from here for Jews in Australia?
Well, Ariel, I can understand why Jewish people living in Australia have felt utterly dismayed, particularly since October 7. There was the October 9 outrage on the steps of the Opera House where we had an angry mob screaming unspeakable things against Jewish people. Just appalling. It was Australia's day of shame, day of infamy. And since then, we've had many pro-Hamas demonstrations. We've had the attempted firebombing and the firebombing of synagogues and other Jewish facilities. And government at every level has not adequately stamped this out or even called it out. And that's tremendously vexing to me. And it's obviously unbelievably corrosive for the, I guess, peace of mind of Australians of Jewish faith, Jewish background, and their friends and neighbours. So look, these have been terribly disconcerting times. And while I think that the leaders of the current government are at one level well-intentioned, I also fear that by gradually weakening their support for Israel at the United Nations and perhaps, I suppose, making concessions to anti-Jewish, anti-Israel, anti-Semitic voters in parts of Sydney and Melbourne, they're exacerbating the problem. Look, people like me will continue to say that where we have hate speech, it should be dealt with forcefully under the law. Where we have disruptive protests and demonstrations, they should be dealt with forcefully under the law. Where we have, I think, encampments in support of hate speech, I think simply on public access and safety grounds, they should be swiftly removed. So people like me will keep trying to speak up in favour of the best Australian values and in support of Jewish Australians who feel under threat, and we'll fight on, I guess. But I can't guarantee that government will be better now than it was a week or so back, or than it's been over the last 18 months or so. All I can say is that there are lots of people in Australia who aren't Jewish, who don't have Jewish ancestry, who are still very much on the side of Israel as the only liberal democracy in the Middle East, as the only place where diversity is not just encouraged but welcomed and taken for granted. And the friends of Jewish people in Australia will keep rallying to their side, and the more difficulties they face, the more solidarity will.
But Prime Minister Abbott, how is it, just in a general sense, that there is a voting bloc in Australia, and I think we can't deny it, that just doesn't like Jews, and that some of the current the party in power seems to be placating to them, like, we're not going to be too supportive of Israel, we won't crack down on some of the protests. We've even heard, like, some of them even talking to this block of voters, and at least, like, sort of saying, no, we'll be okay, like, because they need their votes.
Mm. Yeah, and one of the problems that a lot of Western countries have now got is poorly integrated migrant groups who've been allowed to bring their hatreds with them. The idea that there should be Australian citizens in significant numbers in significant parts of our big cities who are more interested in what happens in Gaza than in what's happening here in Sydney or Melbourne is pretty bizarre, frankly. We shouldn't have allowed this to happen. I'm all in favour of a multi-ethnic Australia. We've been I suppose, an immigrant nation ever since 1788, and that's part of our strength. But everyone who comes to Australia, regardless of his or her background, religion, culture, should be very strongly encouraged to be part of Team Australia, not simply inmates in Hotel Australia or guests in Hotel Australia. And part of Team Australia is support for Australian values and judging what's happening overseas in accordance with Australia's national interests and Australia's values, not in accordance with some notion of religious solidarity. Now, I can understand the sympathy that Australians who might have kinsfolk in Gaza can feel for the danger that they might be exposed to. But in the end, Israel has been fighting a just war against an implacable enemy in Hamas. There are good people in Gaza. And I suppose we were reminded of that the other day when many, many thousands of Gazans risked their lives by protesting against Hamas. And appallingly, A number of those people have subsequently been killed under the most barbarous circumstances. So all credit to those people in Hamas, in Gaza, who are prepared to take risks on behalf of human decency. All credit to them. But the fact that the Hamas dictatorship, the Hamas theocracy, reacted so savagely just shows that Israel is indeed engaged in a just war, and it can't be stopped until Hamas is entirely eliminated, absolutely and utterly eliminated. And this is not a genocide against the people of Gaza. This is a legitimate attempt to destroy an evil movement, which is itself dedicated not just to the destruction of the state of Israel, but to the elimination of Jewish people. And that's just
Yes.
evil, simply
Yes, and
evil.
their charter, by the way, says it. And also, I would just say that the Gazans who have been killed now by Hamas, murdered, a lot of the protesters have not come out to protest for them in the streets of Melbourne, Sydney, London, New York. They protested when Israel was fighting, like you said, the just war. But when Gazans who are being repressed by Hamas come out and get killed, no one protests for their sake.
Exactly right. And Ariel, what we've seen in recent times, particularly since October the 7th, is an unholy alliance between anti-Semitic, Jew-hating individuals and the cultural Marxist left that see Israel as some kind of a manifestation of white privilege, some kind of a manifestation of settler colonialism. Now, this completely misconstrues what's happening in Israel. I mean, Jewish people have been living in what's currently Israel for many, many thousands of years. Ethnically, Jewish people are scarcely distinguishable. The Israelis are scarcely distinguishable from their neighbours in Jordan and Egypt, from people in Gaza and the West Bank. So look, it's an utter misconception of reality, but nevertheless, it's part of the modern left, and so there is this, I think, really unholy alliance. I described it, but I just don't understand how we can have this weird phenomenon of the likes of Queers for Palestine. If they were to go to if they were to go to Gaza as Queers for Palestine, their fate would be appalling. In fact, the only place where they would be able to be Queers for Palestine and be relatively unmolested anywhere in the Middle East is, in fact, in Israel itself. I mean, this is the weirdness of all of this, Ariel.
Yes, it's like chickens for KFC, Douglas Murray has to say. And
Turkeys for
also,
Christmas. Exactly right.
yes,
I mean, it's just
exactly.
weird. Yeah.
I just want to say
Mm.
about that I think you'd find it interesting. I spoke with Ayan Hirsi Ali, and she said that well, like you said, the culture Marxists, the woke, whatever you want to call them, and the Islamists have this unholy alliance. But the Islamists have a plan for the day if they win, God forbid. The left, the extreme left, has no plan, and which is why they'll be eaten. The day they win, they will all be eaten by the Islamists. So it's like it's very short-sighted, this alliance by these two sides.
Well, there's a kind of, the cultural Marxists are essentially nihilists. They basically want to destroy the Anglo-Celtic culture, the Judeo-Christian ethic, notwithstanding the fact that the Anglo-Celtic culture and the Judeo-Christian ethic has produced some of the most wonderful societies on earth. And whatever faults the Anglo-American global ascendancy has, and at least until very recently, the world has been more safe, more fair, more free, more rich for more people than any time in history. And I tell you, as it ebbs away, as it seems to be now, we will vastly regret it when it's gone.
You're making me very depressed. I want to get to some silver lining in the election of Australia. The Green Party, which I think is really an anti-Semitic party at this point, they have 0 seats for the first time, right? So we can be happy with that, right?
They appear to have lost all of their 4 seats in the lower house of parliament. They will undoubtedly continue to have seats in the upper house of parliament, but this certainly is a big step in a better direction. And to give our late leader, Peter Dutton, credit where it's due, they've only lost their seats in the lower house because Peter Dutton made a very principled decision to put the mainstream leftist party, the Labor Party, ahead on the Liberal preferential how to vote card of the extreme leftist party, the Greens. So one of Peter Dutton's enduring political legacies will be at least this eclipse of the Greens, and I think he can take great pride in that, and I think the nation owes him a debt of gratitude. Now, the beneficiaries, at least in the short term, have been the Labor Party, and they won't be grateful. They'll basically attribute it to their own cleverness, but nevertheless, it was actually the decency and the honour of Peter Dutton that's produced the silver lining to the cloud, so to speak.
Yeah, Prime Minister Abbott, can I ask you just in general about conservatism? I'm a conservative slash libertarian, I guess. I don't know where to put myself on the scale. You mentioned liberal on free markets, conservative on family and community and all that. Where do you see we have President Trump in the US? It's a different type of right wing than we've seen of American conservatism. Do you see that conservatism in all Western countries will be going the MAGA direction, or will you see? Do you think there will be a blowback? We see the tariff war, the Bush years, the well, I guess Bush was the last conservative president before Trump, but conservatives in general never used to support tariffs at this level, at least. And we see this as one of his big issues. So, where are we going in terms of the right in liberal democracies from here?
Well, look, speaking candidly with you, Ariel, I don't think President Trump is much of a conservative. I'm not saying that everything he supports is wrong by any means, or that everything he's doing is bad by any means, but conservatism is ultimately based on respect. Respect for your family, respect for your neighbourhood, respect for your faith, respect for your country. Innate in conservatism is this sense of respect for everything that has made you, because in the end, we have self-respect. We think that whatever mistakes we make and whatever failings we have, we're essentially good. And that which has made us is essentially good. Doesn't mean that it shouldn't change, sometimes in significant ways. Certainly, it's always going to continue to evolve, but at the heart of conservatism is this concept of respect. Now, whatever else you can say about President Trump, he doesn't always manifest respect to anyone, let alone everyone, and I think that's a pity. I should say that I think there are kind of there are several Trumps. Domestic Trump, I think, has done some pretty smart things. I mean, strong borders are good. Exploiting your resources is good. Efficient government is good. Two genders is good. And then there's foreign Trump. Now, supporting Israel is good, but trying to claim Greenland, constantly mocking the Canadians as the 51st state. I mean, this is an insult to a friend and ally. And when he first said it, it was a mildly amusing joke, but he keeps saying it, and I just think it's fundamentally wrong. Now, on tariffs, I think that free trade maximises economic well-being. I think that free trade between like-minded countries with comparable standards of living is almost invariably a good thing. I can understand why you might not want to practice fully free trade with your strategic competitors. So I think there is a much stronger case for tariffs against communist China than there is against countries like Canada and Australia. So, look, I think it's a very mixed bag. Of course, the Trump presidency is very much a work in progress. It's far too early to judge it in any comprehensive way. As I said, domestically, I'd give him some credit, but I think there's been a lot of unnecessary upheaval globally. And I just hope that President Trump appreciates just what a force for good America has been. I hope he appreciates that the much better world that we've had until recently is fundamentally a product of American benevolence. And I'm grateful to America for everything it's done for the wider world. I think that the respect that America has had for so long is based on the fact that most people, even if they have been critical of American policy from time to time, have appreciated America's good intentions, its fundamental good intentions. And I think that President Trump, I hope, would benefit from being more aware of that. I think it was a statement attributed to de Tocqueville, possibly not accurately, but the statement is America is great because America is good. And if America ever ceases being good, it will cease being great. Well, I think a lot of people have worried about the possible demise of that fundamental benevolence that America has brought to the wider world until very, very recently.
Can we also ask your opinion? By the way, I just want to say that you yourself, as prime minister, signed a lot of free trade agreements, and I think it's so important that this continues to be a conservative platform all over the world because, like you said, it is 100% true. Free trade between peoples makes both people happy and prosperous, and when you stop that
There's
free trade,
completely correct. Now, I mean, the globalized world, particularly the admission under President Clinton of China, communist China, to the WTO, the globalized world has certainly maximized economic well-being. I suspect that it's disproportionately benefited China, which has taken advantage of free trade without practicing it. I mean, communist China has been an economic predator in many respects. There's been secret subsidies. There's been technological theft. There's been an attempt to rort and ramp markets, all of which I think does need to be called out and resisted. But there is no doubt that, speaking generally, free trade maximises economic well-being, and certainly between like-minded countries of comparable standard of living, we should always be looking to maximise trade, not to restrict it.
Prime Minister Abbott, lastly, about Ukraine and Russia, I think that in on a moral sense, we are. There's three, I think, big. Tell me if you agree with me. Big, I guess, fights in the Western world for Western values. One is where I am sitting here. Israel, Hamas, Iran, Hezbollah, the Houthis, all this craziness around us, which is a Western liberal democracy against Islamist forces, dark forces, and then you have Ukraine and Russia and Taiwan, maybe in China, that hopefully doesn't get worse. But Ukraine and Russia is something that the West needs to, I think, at least not let Ukraine lose, let alone win. And it's you were worried, I think, in the beginning that Trump would abandon Ukraine, right? Where do you think we are now?
Well, he seems to have walked back his almost servile support for Putin, his hard to credit belief that somehow Russia was the victim as opposed to the aggressor. So that's good. I think he's coming to appreciate the real nature of the Putin regime. That's good. I think it's critical that Western countries, the friends of freedom everywhere, continue to support Ukraine. And while it is very much an unequal struggle, the extraordinary thing up till now has been the incredible bravery and creativity and courage of the Ukrainian people. They've got their heart in this in a way that the Russian conscripts don't. So if they are given even a modicum of support, eventually I think they will at least preserve their own freedom, even if they aren't necessarily able to recapture all of their legitimate territory. But look, hopefully America will move through this phase of at least apparent rhetorical ambivalence about Ukraine and lean a tilt towards Putin. But you're dead right, Ariel. I mean, there are three absolutely implacable challenges to the democratic liberal West right now. It's the fascist dictatorship in Moscow, it's the communist dictatorship in Beijing, and it's the Islamist dictatorship in Tehran. There's no real simpatico between any of them, but they are utterly united in their desire to crush the liberal West, which they hate. They hate. And we've got to appreciate that they are an existential threat, and we've got to respond accordingly.
Yes, which is why here in Israel we're so worried about the negotiations between the Trump administration and the Iranians. No one knows exactly what they keep on saying different things. The Americans, one day, yeah, we'll let them enrich. The next day, no, they can't have anything. So we don't know what's going on behind the scenes, and we have to hope that the President Trump holds to what he said, that they can't have a nuclear weapon. But we don't have a lot of time. I want to have last question because I know you're running late. When are you going to come to Israel so we can meet you in person and you can meet with like-minded people and we can get together, so to speak?
Well, Ariel, the last time I was in Israel was 2019. I've made quite a few trips to Israel over the years. The first was in 1982 when I was a student in England and I had a backpacking trip to Israel. I was there for about a month from memory, and I found it an absolutely enthralling, fascinating place. I'd love to come back. COVID stopped me for a couple of years. Since then, the security situation has been a bit problematic, and trips that were about to happen or conferences that were about to happen that I was going to have unfortunately been cancelled because
Yeah.
the people who were involved have suddenly had to attend to more pressing security matters.
Yes.
But as as soon as a conference wants me and goes ahead, I'll be there.
So, Prime Minister Abbott, I will get in touch with you with a few conferences, but but
Good
anyway, I
stuff.
wanted to say that it's such a pleasure talking to you. It's a pleasure knowing that it warms the heart knowing that we have people like you around the world that support us and that support Western values in general. And it's something that I used to think was taken for granted, but it's not. And it takes courage to stand up for the truth and for the right way of life. And so I thank you so much for being with us today.
I regard it. I regard Israel as a sort of a sibling country. It's a wonderful, wonderful place, and Australians feel very much at home there, as I'm sure Israelis feel here in Australia. And if freedom is diminished anywhere. It's damaged everywhere. And that's why the flourishing of Israel is an incredibly important national interest of Australia.
Yes. So thank you so much, Prime Minister Abbott.
Thank you. Thank you, Ariel.